Hillary Clinton just flat out lied at this climate conference, and we brought the receipts. Also, John Kerry did more than that. We know he's a blowhard, but he was flatulent, and it's a little embarrassing. We'll reveal all. Plus, is John Fetterman actually the most likable, reasonable Democrat in Washington? He might be. And is Gavin Newsom a lizard person? We'll reveal that too. We're live. Let's get to it. So it's called the COP24 is what they're calling it. They're in the United Arab Emirates, and private jets from all over the world have landed there, walked into beautifully air-conditioned offices and hotel rooms in the desert because, well, you know, it's the desert. And they're all pontificating about you turning on your air conditioner or driving your car or turning on your lights when they think you shouldn't. That's called the COP24 conference. And they're going to basically try to dictate your country's energy policies without going through the messy business of legislation or even winning elections. John Kerry, who couldn't win an election on a presidential level back in 1994, wasn't that? No, 2004. Oh boy, the decades just fly by quickly, don't they? He is the unelected, unconfirmed climate czar. And he's over there in the United Arab Emirates deciding what you can do with your electricity here, specifically when it comes to coal-powered plants. Listen to this. And West Virginia, Pennsylvania, hope you're listening. This is your Democratic Party.
Going to be transitioning out of coal. There shouldn't be any more coal-fired power plants permitted anywhere in the world. That's how.
Wait, where was that when he was running for president? Remember when he was trying to get votes in Pennsylvania? By the way, there's not going to be any more coal-fired plants anywhere in the world. Speaking of that, what about Joe Biden? Joe Biden promised you all, I'm not going to get rid of coal. I'm not going to get rid of gas or oil. I'm not going to stop fracking. But of course, when you then fall for it and he becomes president, this is who he puts in charge of the non-existent climate czar position. They absolutely want to rip away coal. And by the way, in case you didn't know, coal right now is about 20% of the world's electricity. 36% here in America, I believe, last time I checked.
You can do something for health. And the reality is that we're not doing it. So, the measure here is really sounding the alarm bell. I find myself getting more and more militant because I do not understand how adults who are in position of responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that the climate crisis and the health crisis are one and the same. Going to be transitioning out of
all
coal.
right, so we're going to get back to John Kerry in just a second because Hillary Clinton also joined him there. And I want you to hear what she had to say. But real fast, that whole diatribe there about, the adults in the room who should be making these decisions aren't. Who's he talking to? Because the vast, vast, vast majority of new coal-fired plants on this planet are coming from one country, China. Why doesn't he just say it? But he gives that lecture, and you know that he's really talking to us. He's talking to Americans. He's talking to people in Western democracies who for some misguided reasons, decide that they want to shoot themselves in the foot or in the head, for that matter, and limit their own possibilities for energy usage under this false religion of climate change. And that's where his words will actually make some sort of difference or influence, because they're all renting their clothing in guilt over driving a gas-powered car or turning their lights on in the dark. But meanwhile, China is spewing carbon emissions left and right all over the place by the metric ton per hour with all the coal-fired plants, and he won't mention them. He won't say anything about China. And then there's Hillary Clinton. This is absolutely brilliant.
We're seeing and beginning to pay attention and to count and record the deaths that are related to climate, and by far the biggest killer is extreme heat. I mean,
All right, let me just hang on for a second because it just occurred to me. This is, everyone says, why does the world hate us? This is why the world hates us. Oh, the world hates America. Why does the world hate America? This is why the world hates America, because we send them our failed politicians, the people who we wouldn't even approve of, to be our leaders. And we send them over to the United Arab Emirates, and they've got to endure John Kerry and Hillary Clinton hectoring them and lecturing them and telling them what they're supposed to do when we Americans wouldn't even tolerate it. This woman was a disaster. We didn't want her anywhere near the Oval Office making policy decisions for us, but the rest of the world, yeah, you guys take her. Listen to what she has to say. She's brilliant. All right, so she just told you that the leading killer in the world is heat. Is that what she said?
That are related to climate, and by far the biggest killer is extreme heat.
I
mean, even in Europe last summer, which has the ability to count and figure out what happened, they recorded 61,000 deaths.
Did you catch what she just said there? In Europe, where they had the ability to count these things. Now, she's about to juxtapose that statistic to other places in the world that aren't Europe, places like Africa and Asia and Latin America, where apparently, if you understand the juxtaposition she's creating here, they don't have the ability to count. Can we just walk down the path for a second of a conservative or Republican or right of center politician making a statement on an international stage that only in Europe do they have the ability to count things? I'm sure there's a word for that kind of mentality. In Africa, they don't really know how to count. Kind of racist. That's all right, Hillary. I'm going to let you finish.
Because of the heat in Europe. We don't have that kind of number yet from Africa, Asia, Latin America, but
because they're stupid.
We know and estimate that we probably could measure about 500,000 deaths. And the majority of those are women and girls, and particularly pregnant women.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh at the idea of 500,000 deaths, but this is the perfect left-wing scare tactic. We don't have the ability to count, but we believe it's about 500,000, and it's majority women, children, pregnant women, by the way. It's like everything in this world. Testicular cancer has become a real plague, and women are hit hardest by it. But the problem is, and the real problem is, that everything she just told you is a lie. This is an article in Forbes from just this year. Excessive heat can kill, but extreme cold still causes many more fatalities. Now, I'm not trying to make any grand pronouncement here about the car that you drive and the carbon emissions and global warming and climate change and all these other things. Honestly, it's political. Everyone has passionate beliefs about it. You follow your own path there for whatever you want to believe about it. Over here, we're just going to follow the science. And the science, as illustrated in this article in Forbes magazine, that specifically highlights a study published in the Lancet Planetary Health Guide, says that in a 2021 study, for every death linked to heat, 9 are connected to cold. Excessive cold can exacerbate pre-existing medical conditions like cardiovascular and respiratory disease. Death rates from myocardial infarction, you heard me, infarction, increase as temperatures drop. This appears to reflect the way cold can affect blood circulation. People exposed to extreme cold conditions can also suffer from direct effects such as frostbite and potentially deadly hypothermia. In other words, if you're really keeping score of what kind of climate condition is the most deadly, as Hillary Clinton just claimed, excessive heat is not the biggest problem. Excessive cold is. Also, we have technology in the Western world to be able to mitigate the excessive heat. We have air conditioning. It's brilliant. It's a miracle. It actually has saved many lives. And in the United Arab Emirates, in the middle of the, shall I repeat, desert, where they're having this climate conference, they're all sitting in that room cooled by air conditioning. If they had this outdoors in an open air forum, they wouldn't be wearing suits and ties because it's the desert. And yet we can now populate desert climates. We didn't used to be able to. We can build sky rises. We can build factories. We can do incredible things now because of the technological advances we've made thanks to energy. If you really think about it, cold is a much bigger problem. Excessive cold temperatures is a much bigger problem for humankind than excessive heat. It just makes sense if you think about it. I mean, when was the last time you caught a really nasty flu during the summer? It seems to me that those kind of infections happen during the cold winter months, don't they? Why? Because cold is dangerous. And that's why that Lancet study backs that up. Can we please, though, because that was pretty serious conversation that we just had, wasn't it? That was pretty science-based. It was pretty fact-based, reasonable. And we don't want to walk down that path too far on this show because at the heart of things, we're children. So I want to go back to one other moment that happened during John Kerry's statement. I want you to listen closely. Most people are focusing on the fact that he wants to end coal-fired plants and remove coal as an energy source worldwide, and that he has a authoritarian, totalitarian mentality about himself, that he thinks he can do it and pass these things through a climate treaty that they pass overseas and not worry about the Senate or the House or any representatives of the American people voting on it. That's a problem. But the biggest problem is, during this entire exchange, representing us, the United States of America, he ripped a fart out. He let loose with flatulence on an international stage. John Kerry did. You don't believe me? All right, you be the judge. Listen.
I understand how adults who are in position of responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that
you heard it right. All right, listen again. It's right after he says on a daily basis.
Responsibility can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that
the man farted. You talk about greenhouse gases. This is why they put him in this position and circumvented a Senate confirmation hearing. Because let me tell you something, he used to be a senator, and I assure you, his colleagues in the Senate know that he rips farts out on a regular basis. He just lets them rip. He's got to. Look at it. He's from Boston. They eat baked beans all the time.
Can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that,
honestly, that's more obvious than the Eric Swalwell fart. I promise we didn't doctor this audio. We didn't. You go find the audio yourself. It's on social media right now, and you can see it directly. Then no one doctored this. This is clearly John Kerry farting on an international stage, and he should lose his job immediately. Our representatives should not. Our representatives do not fart. Even Hillary Clinton didn't fart. If she did, it sounded like a little girl fart. Not like John Kerry. This is like a big old grandpa fart.
Can be avoiding responsibility for taking away those things that are killing people on a daily basis. And the reality is that
John Kerry farted. All right, have we cleansed ourselves from the scientific research and serious? All right, good, because we don't want to. We don't want this show to lose its reputation. Representative Jayapal of Massachusetts appeared on CNN State of the Union with Dana Bash in one of the most extraordinary exchanges since October 7th that you will ever see. I want to remind you that Congresswoman Jayapal has positioned herself as one of the squad members, which of course means they're lefty, they're progressive, they champion every kind of left-wing cause, including counting themselves as the real feminists in the room. I mean, they're more feminists than the feminists are. She led the charge in the House against Brett Kavanaugh. She believed Christine Blasey Ford. Clearly, Brett Kavanaugh was raped. Brett Kavanaugh raped Christine Blasey Ford. Women must believe. All women must be believed, was her position back then. Listen to her equivocate over the sexual assaults conducted by Hamas terrorists in Israel.
Other country.
I want to ask you about sexual violence and it's kind of remarkable that this issue hasn't gotten enough attention globally. Widespread use of rape, brutal rape, sexual violence against Israeli women by Hamas. I've seen a lot of progressive women, generally speaking, they're quick to defend women's rights and speak out against using rape as a weapon of war, but downright silent on what we saw on October 7th and what might be happening inside Gaza right now to these hostages. Why is that?
Can I just, Dana Bash is a very polite young woman, and good for her, I guess, for asking this question. But if I could put it in my words, because that was way too apologetic, the way she asked that. Let me ask this Congresswoman the same question. Women were raped on October 7th. They were dragged through the streets. We've seen the images. The rapists, the Hamas terrorists that you're defending right now and making excuses for, they live streamed the sexual assaults. The women continue to be raped while they're being held. You stand up there and you grandstand like you're the voice of women and protecting women's rights all around the world. Why in the hell have you been silent? You and your fellow squad members have been calling for a ceasefire within hours of all of those rapes occurring. You've been trying to blame Israel and saying that the victims in all of these sexual assaults are really the problem. Oh, this is what an oppressed people does to their oppressor. This is what happens with an occupation. Are you kidding me? What the hell is wrong with you? That's how I would ask the question. But let's see the answer. To understand, Dana Bash asked it in the most polite, apologetic, mamby-pamby kind of, gee, I feel bad even asking this question, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Listen to how she answers when it's set up that way.
I mean, I don't know that that's true. I think we always talk about the impact of war on women in particular. In fact, I remember 20 years ago, I did a petition around the war in Iraq.
You said
saying
have
that
you talked about it
Oh,
since?
Yeah. I did a petition. I did a petition about how women were treated in Iraq. Who do you think she claimed were the ones abusing the women in Iraq at that time? The Iraqi soldiers? Saddam Hussein's goons? I guarantee you that when she was talking about the suffering of women in the war in Iraq, she was blaming America. She was blaming American troops. So no, listen, I always care about how women are being treated in a war, as long as it's America or Israel or some other Western nation who's perpetrating the crimes. But, you got to excuse the Hamas terrorists.
Oh,
It's October
absolutely.
7th.
And I've condemned what Hamas has done. I've condemned
Specifically
all
against
of the
women?
actions. Absolutely. The rape, of course. But I think
But, something tells me that when you're making a statement right there as an elected official and you're saying, yeah, the rapes are awful, but what could possibly follow that? What sane, rational, moral statement could follow the but? Well, we're about to find out. Here's Congressman Jayapal's but.
we have to remember that Israel is a democracy. That is why they are a strong ally of ours. And if they do not comply with international humanitarian law, they are bringing themselves to a place that makes it much more difficult strategically for them to be able to build the kinds of allies to keep public opinion with them.
Did you see what happened right there? Dana Bash asked her about how Hamas terrorists raped and brutalized women and continue to do so while they hold them, 8 weeks now after the terror attacks of October 7th. And Jayapal sort of waves it off with the back of her hands. Yes, I've condemned that. It's terrible. It's horrible. But, and then she went on a whole diatribe about Israel and Israel not adhering to international laws and humanitarian laws. But by the way, I keep hearing this all the time. Israel must follow the rules of international war. You know what would be awesome? If they could even articulate one violation that Israel has conducted, one violation that they're guilty of. Well, Israel has to follow the rules. It's like somebody sitting up and saying, the Philadelphia Eagles better make sure they follow the rules in the game tonight. Okay. How about this? How about you throw the flag when they break the rules and they'll be penalized? Can you name me something that Israel has done? But they all we know it's a dog whistle is what it is, if I can use the left's language. When someone like this gets in front of a camera and says, and you're going to hear Kamala Harris do basically the same thing in a little bit, when they wring their hands and they say, we just want to make sure that Israel knows that we're watching and they must adhere to every international rule when it comes to warfare. It's this implication that they violated those rules. Well, if you can name a violation, name it. Well, they bombed a hospital. No, they bombed terrorists who are hiding in a hospital and using women and children as human shields, which, by the way, violates international law when it comes to warfare. You want to find somebody breaking international law, it's the terrorists. All right, let's get back to her butt, because it's quite a butt, isn't it?
And frankly, morally, I think we cannot say that one war crime deserves another. That is not what international humanitarian law says.
Okay, with respect, I was just asking about the women, and you turned it back to Israel.
Thank you.
I'm asking you about Hamas. In fact,
I already answered your question, Dana. I said it's horrific, and I think that
I said I didn't like the rape. What more do you want from me, Dana? What's with the tone? What? It is inconceivable. Can you imagine any Republican or any conservative conducting themselves this way with this specific line of questioning? It's not even about women's rights or abortion or equal pay. This is about rape, about sexual assault. And she seems annoyed that she's even asked the question. And I was like, listen, I gave you my talking point saying I condemn violence on both sides. What more do you want from me? She also just mentioned, what would she say? One war crime doesn't deserve another. Well, clearly everything that happened October 7th is a war crime. Everything. And I mean everything. Beginning with the fact that the terrorists were dressed as civilians, which is a war crime. They work for Hamas, which is a government entity. They are a violent military subset of the Hamas government. By international rules of law, you must be identified in uniform. So from the very beginning of the October 7th terror attacks, everything about it, they specifically targeted civilians. There were no military targets involved there. We're not talking about people who get caught in the line of fire or any kind of collateral damage here. And then add to that the sexual assaults, the rapes, the kidnapping, the hostage taking, the live streams to humiliate people. Everything about it was a war crime. And then she throws out this statement, well, we don't want to equivocate. One war crime deserves another. Oh, and again, God, if only I were in Dana Bash's chair right now. Can I just identify as Dana Bash one time and do her show? If I'm saying, I would love to interrupt her and say, excuse me, you just accused Israel of a war crime. Could you name one? Name one. They can't. They throw these statements out there. Oh, war crimes, war crimes. Can you be specific? Shouldn't be too hard. Tell me the war crime Israel is guilty of. This is a sitting congresswoman for the Democrats.
Rape is horrific. Sexual assault is horrific. I think that it happens in war situations. Terrorist organizations like Hamas obviously are using these as tools. Mm-hmm. However, I think...
however, that's just a fancy butt. So we heard her butt. Now we're going to hear her fancy butt. We're going to hear her however.
We have to be balanced about bringing in the outrages against Palestinians. Yeah. 15,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes, 3/4 of whom are women and children.
And it's horrible, but you don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I think we're not. I don't want this to be the hierarchy of oppressions. Right. I think 15,000 people have been killed.
It shouldn't.
Wow. Yeah, it's not hard. Thinking things morally is not hard. Thinking through these things. Yes, 15,000 dead Palestinians, horrible. Palestinians have every opportunity to keep that from happening. They can, first of all, not hide behind civilians and embed their operations within the walls of civilian areas, number one. They could stop shooting rockets off from within civilian areas. So when Israel defends themselves by taking out the rocket positions, that means that civilians who live in the area will also be killed. So we don't do that in America. Israel doesn't do that, by the way, in their country. They could also, by the way, just stop shooting rockets altogether. That'd be a great start. They could not send their goon squad terrorists in to slaughter 1,500 innocent people in a terror attack. That would have really stopped, anything from happening in Gaza, because Gaza, for the most part, hasn't been attacked at all. In fact, every single death at the hands of an Israeli soldier in Hamas since the Gaza liberation, or when Gaza wasn't liberated, but Gaza was able to have their own rule in 2005, every single death at the hands of an Israeli military action has it been in retaliation to something Gaza did, to something Hamas did. So yes, all those 15,000 people, terrible. Guess who could stop it today? Hamas. They could release all the hostages. Think about, you know what? When we're engaged in warfare, in generally speaking, in the Western world, since the medieval times, when casualties are horrible and civilians are dying, there's a way for a responsible government to stop it from happening. It's pretty old tactic, actually. You put up a white flag and you surrender and you say, okay, enough. That would end it pretty quickly. What was that phrase she used? This despicable.
You don't see Israeli soldiers raping.
Well, Dana, I
Palestinian
think
women.
we're not, I don't want this to be the hierarchy of oppressions. I
Right.
think
The hierarchy of oppressions. Oh, sure. Innocent Israeli women were raped and sexually assaulted. But, Palestinians don't have fuel. All right, let's move on, because as bad as she is, frankly, I think the Vice President of the United States is worse. Before she attended the climate summit, she put together a press conference where she read what she was told to say about the Israel-Gaza war. And listen to this.
Well, as I said, we have to revitalize the Palestinian Authority, which means giving the support that is necessary for good governance. Understanding that on the issues that must be resolved as we think of a plan for the day after, it is about good governance, which will bring transparency and accountability to the people of Gaza and the West Bank. It's also about what we need to do to recognize there must be some plan for security for the region. And I suspect as a plan develops, it will take into account interim and then longer term.
All right, so that's a whole lot of word salad, but let me unpack some of it for you. First of all, I guess this is the Biden administration signaling that they prefer the Palestinian Authority to Hamas. Let me tell you who the Palestinian Authority is here, because I don't think she knows. I'm sure the person who wrote these talking points for her does know, Valerie Jarrett. The Palestinian Authority was born out of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's the PLO. It used to be run by Yasser Arafat, terrorist. These are the people who, you ever see that great movie Munich? Right, where the terrorists come in and they slaughter a bunch of Israeli athletes at the Munich 72 Olympic Games. You've seen that movie, right? Yeah, that was the PLO. Yeah. And then in the 90s, they negotiated a peace deal that Madeleine Albright and Bill Clinton sort of oversaw. And it ultimately gave the PLO legitimacy to manage the two Palestinian territories in Israel, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The West Bank is on the far eastern side of Israel, and the Gaza Strip is on the far western side. In between those two Palestinian-controlled regions is Israel, the nation that we know and love. Yasser Arafat was given the opportunity to transform the PLO into this new thing called the Palestinian Authority. And they had an election, and he was elected president. And one of the parts of the peace agreement, the Wye River Memorandum, look it up, Wye River Memorandum, W-Y-E. One of the things that the Palestinian Authority had to do to earn the right to self-governance and their own elections and all of those things in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip was to pass a legislation that would have changed the Palestinian Authority's charter to acknowledge Israel's right to exist. That was in the 90s. They still haven't done it. Oh, and after Yasser Arafat died, they had another presidential election. Their current president, President Abbas, he was elected president, by the Palestinians in the West Bank in 2005. In 2005, 18 years ago. They were scheduled to have another presidential election 2 years ago in 2021, but then President Abbas suspended that presidential election. So the organization, the good governance that Kamala Harris is now embracing for the Palestinian people, is an organization that has had 2 presidential elections in 30 years, the last one 18 years ago. And that guy who won, the president, continues to postpone upcoming presidential elections. There's a word for that. He's a dictator. And by the way, the Palestinian Authority, the good governance that Kamala Harris is talking about, a part of their federal budget there, such as it is in the West Bank at the Palestinian Authority, is to set aside a bunch of money as rewards for people who become suicide bombers and take out as many innocent Israeli civilians as possible. They reward their families with money if they become terrorists. That's the good governance that Kamala Harris and the Biden administration, on your behalf, is now calling for. And she went on.
In the first day after this temporary truce had ended, Israel.
Wait, I need to pause there for a minute. I love the passive voice from this reporter. Yeah, and the first day after the truce ended. Hey, who ended the truce? How'd that truce end exactly? Yeah, that would be Hamas firing rockets into Israel. The truce ended. Oh my gosh, this truce just ended somehow. No.
In the first day after this temporary truce had ended, Israel killed 200 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Is that minimizing?
According to the Gaza Health Ministry. There's no such thing as the Gaza Health Ministry. It's a propaganda arm. 200 Palestinians were killed by Israelis after the ceasefire, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. I mean, if she had any integrity at that moment, she should have said, "Get out of here with your Gaza Health Ministry." These are the same people who said what hundreds of people died in the hospital attack. The bombing that didn't come from Israel was a rocket from Gaza, and by the way, didn't even hit the hospital. But I'm gonna let you finish.
Harm to civilian life, is that acceptable?
I don't have the details to tell you exactly who was killed, but I will say this.
I don't have any facts in front of me, but that's not going to stop me from saying this. I do love it when a politician says that, when they admit that they're basically talking out of their butt right now. But what she's about to say out of her butt is incredibly dangerous and disgusting for our ally Israel.
We have been very clear about where we stand on this, which is innocent civilian lives should not be intentionally targeted, and that Israel must do more to protect innocent life in Gaza and innocent civilians in Gaza.
Let me tell you something, Kamala Harris. First of all, the Israelis are actually doing more to protect innocent life in Gaza than Hamas is in Gaza. Otherwise, Hamas would actually move the innocent lives out of the way of the line of fire, number one. Number two, you just admitted that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So why would you even go on and make this statement? And number three, with your vast, vast military knowledge and experience, Kamala Harris, I would love for you to tell Benjamin Netanyahu, who clearly knows nothing about defending his nation and certainly knows nothing about military tactics and battle, you know, considering he's actually been in war. I'd love for you to tell Israel what the hell they're supposed to do. Israel has to do more. Name me one thing that Israel should be doing that they're not doing right now. This is so disgusting and so disrespectful and so stupid, actually, for our vice president to say. But it actually gets worse. You talk about stupid. Kamala Harris was asked a question about Israel wanting a buffer zone there, you know, like a line of demarcation, a demilitarized zone between the border of the West Bank, the border of Gaza and Israel. You know, so the next time the terrorists are coming, they can see them before it's too late. A buffer zone makes sense, right? So she's asked about the buffer zone. She doesn't answer the question. So the reporter follows up.
The buffer zone, you didn't answer her question on that.
What is the question exactly?
Israel has been suggesting creating a buffer zone in Gaza, Madam Vice President. What is the U.S. view on that?
We have not weighed in on that.
All right, hold on. This is just fantastic. Hey, you didn't answer the question about the buffer zone. Well, what exactly is the question about the buffer zone? Israel wants a buffer zone. Oh, yeah, we don't have an opinion on that. All right, this is the quintessential Miss South Carolina at the Teen USA moment. Could you repeat the question, please? To give herself another 30 seconds to come up with an answer. And even then she couldn't do it. Because watch her face. Watch her face.
The buffer zone, you didn't answer her question on.
So the reporter says, you didn't answer the question about the buffer zone. And then she says, what is the question? The person says, should we have a buffer zone? And then she says, we don't have an opinion. You would think she could have said, we don't have an opinion on a buffer zone when she was told you didn't answer the question about the buffer zone. But it's so obvious that she's buying time.
What is the question exactly?
Israel has been suggesting creating a buffer zone in Gaza, Madam Vice President. What is the U.S. view on that?
We have not weighed in on that.
He is just as dumb as a box of rocks, but she's also dangerous, incredibly dangerous. And she's speaking on your behalf right now, throwing our ally under the bus in a really dangerous way. Hopefully, Israel's ignoring them. Hopefully, Israel will do what's best for Israel and not give a crap about what the president or vice president of the United States cares about it. As dumb as she is, she's not quite as dumb as this woman. This woman was waving a Palestinian flag and screaming, well, you'll hear. I don't want to spoil it for you.
Funny, you don't look Palestinian.
From the nation to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the nation to the sea.
No, from the mountains to the sea.
From the mountains to the sea.
That's what we want.
From the mountains to the sea?
Yeah.
Which mountains? You don't know, eh? You fucking idiot.
I mean, I don't necessarily approve of that kind of language, but I think that gentleman speaks for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, your next senator from the great state of New Jersey, right there. Actually, it could be worse. Speaking of senators, it's this guy. What the hell happened to John Fetterman? He's on The View. He's asked about what's going on in, well, your watch.
And you've also been calling to get rid of Menendez, I know. But
this is specifically about George Santos just being expelled on Friday, right? He's already been correct on all of the issues with regard to, Israel and Hamas and the terrorists. And I mean, Fetterman, something has clicked. I think, whatever brain issues he's having, it's actually sort of set him straight. You ever see that movie Phenomenon with John Travolta? When, he gets a brain tumor and suddenly he's capable of doing brilliant things. That may have been what happened with John Fetterman. I don't know. That John Fetterman's body double is making a lot more sense to me all of a sudden. So anyway, he's asked, this is on Friday, right after George Santos was expelled from the House.
first, before we talk about that, what's your reaction to the expulsion?
Well, it's like I'm not surprised, but to me, I think the more important picture is that we have a colleague in the Senate that actually did much more sinister and serious kinds of things. Senator Menendez, he needs to go. And if you are going to expel Santos, how can you allow to somebody like Menendez to remain in the Senate? And Santos's kind of lies were almost funny, and he landed on the moon and that kind of stuff. Whereas I think Menendez, I think, is really a senator for Egypt, not New Jersey. So I really think he needs to go. And especially, it's kind of strange that if Santos is not allowed to remain in the House, someone like that. Yeah.
Are you, though, uncomfortable with the fact that there hasn't been an adjudication, that while he's been charged, there hasn't been a conviction? With Menendez.
Yeah, I just want to pause here for a second, because that, I think, was the funniest moment. Sonny Hostin comes in and says, well, does it bother you that there hasn't been any sort of adjudication or a legal process? And Joy Behar has to specifically say regarding Menendez, because she could have said the exact same thing about George Santos. Listen, I'm not carrying any water for George Santos. I think the guy's kind of a goof. But he hasn't had any process. He hasn't had a trial. He hasn't had an adjudication either. But they just kicked him out. But Sonny Hostin isn't concerned about that. She just wants to, protect Bob Menendez's rights and completely ignores George Santos about that. Here's the thing about George Santos. He's 11 months away from his next election. I think he's already said he's not running for re-election. Let the voters decide if they don't want him in there. Why does everyone have to jump up and that's it? He's got to go. He's got to go. Meanwhile, Jayapal, who's just equivocating rape over in Israel, Rashida Tlaib still has Hamas talking points up on her Twitter feed right now, aiding and abetting the murderous terrorists in Israel. She's a member in good standing of the House of Representatives. Jamal Bowman, for God's sake, is still a member of good standing. But no, we're not going to do anything about that. All right, we'll let Fetterman finish up here.
I am, and it's like he has the right for his day in court and all that, but he doesn't have the right to have those kind of votes and things that's not a right. And I think we need to make that kind of decision to send him out.
Yeah, that's right. John Fetterman making some sense there. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Meanwhile, is Gavin Newsom a lizard person? Obviously, yes, he is a lizard person. Here's a quick segment from Bill Maher's show this weekend.
That he is slick and that he is a lizard person, but everything, every single.
Oh, by the way, I love this. James Carville. That's crossing the line. First of all, James Carville is also a lizard person. Literally, he looks like a gecko of some kind, doesn't he? But the fact that James Carville thinks, oh, that's the politics of personal destruction. You're just name calling now. Really, James? Really? All right, we'll get to James in a minute. But Dave Rubin is pretty good here.
What does that mean? Well, lizards are slippery, but every single thing that he said was a lie. Everything he said. I mean, this place, California, and come on, Bill. This place, did you see the homeless encampment outside this studio? Right outside this studio. I actually brought some fentanyl.
I talk about California's problems a lot, which is probably why Governor Newsom has not been on the show.
Yeah, that's true. But let's just take a moment, please, because, we didn't do a show on Friday, and that would have been the time to review this Gavin Newsom-Ron DeSantis debate, which was very interesting Thursday night. Now, I, like most of the people who watched the debate and actually paid attention to what was said at the debate and know politics and know things like, I used to live in California. I know very well what Gavin Newsom has done to destroy that state. Most of us thought that Ron DeSantis won the debate, partly because of, I'll show you one segment right here that is a perfect illustration. Again, listen to the facts, listen to what he has to say. You can't argue with his position here. And he, by the way, makes a position that every single Republican running for office, no matter what position from school board up to president of the United States, you should be hammering this issue home, because not only is it good for our country and good for our children, but it also is a political winner. And it has to do with the Democrats, personified by Gavin Newsom here, and their position on transgender issues when it comes to our kids.
I've been telling a lot of whoppers tonight, this may be the biggest. In California, if you're a parent in Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina, your minor child can go to California without your knowledge or without your consent and get hormone therapy, puberty blockers, and a sex change operation, all without you knowing or consenting. How in the heck is that honoring parents' rights when you're bringing people from out of state to go around their parents' backs and getting life-altering surgeries? That is radical. That is
Ron,
extreme.
these kids
that is an assault on parents' rights.
You know what, Ron?
It's not for you to decide. It's for the parents to decide. And the parents do not want their kids going to these other things.
Let me go to a follow-up. Let me stay on a follow-up. Let's turn to the issue of education.
Decency and humanity and grace when it comes
to ripping somebody away.
Gentlemen, please. Nobody can hear you.
No, it now becomes impossible because they talk over each other. That's a tactic, by the way. Gavin Newsom did that on purpose and started talking over him because he made a good point. In fact, if you go back and watch the debate, he did that a lot. When Ron DeSantis made a good point, Gavin Newsom would talk over it to sort of mitigate it and lessen the impact of it. And also, you heard what he said. He didn't even deny the fact that a child without a parent's consent can cross state lines, go to California, and permanently alter their body surgically and medically, chemically. The only thing he said was, these kids just want to live. Where's your decency? Where's your humanity? As if decency and humanity and the desire to have a child live does not transcend to the parent. What he's saying, basically, Gavin Newsom, is that he has more decency, more humanity, and cares more about children's lives than their own parents do. In the inherent position that a Democrat politician who supports policies like this has, is that parents are the problem. Parents are the enemy. Children allowed to only make these decisions with their parents' consent are in danger of their own mother and father, and therefore must be protected from their mother and father. That's the Democrats' position here. And it's going to win a lot of elections for Republicans, I assure you. So at moments like that, I think, tell me that Ron DeSantis won this debate. However, I want you to look at this, because I watched the debate on Thursday night. And then Friday morning, I went into my radio studio. I do a morning radio show in Washington, D.C. And while I was preparing for my show at around 4:30 in the morning, Fox News was replaying the debate on the television in my studio, and the sound was down. And so I was sort of glancing up and watching the debate with the sound down. And I realized something. If you don't care about being lied to, if you don't care about facts, if you don't care about policies, and if you just vote for somebody based on how they look and how they might carry themselves and how they feel, Gavin Newsom actually did very well for himself in this debate. Hear me out. Hear me out for a second. I want you to watch this with the sound down. And this is a moment when Gavin Newsom is talking about the border, an incredibly vulnerable position for any Democrat, right? And Ron DeSantis is making the point, is like, oh, are you kidding me? You're telling me Joe Biden wants to fix the border problem? He created the border problem. That's what he says. And it's another moment where they're talking over each other. I want you to watch the two of them without the sound. And maybe you'll see exactly what I see. This is him talking about the border and talking about what he's done in his state. And then he starts turning into DeSantis. And now you'll see both of them react. Do you see it? They'll close up again here in a second. I don't mean this as a personal slight to anybody, but are you seeing what I see? Listen, I don't like Gavin Newsom. The guy's got to be stopped. He's dangerous. He's horrible. He's a villain. He has ruined the state that I used to live in. And he can lie to you with that smile on his face and get away with it. But politics, sadly, especially electoral politics, is about more than being truthful. It's about more than facts. It's about more than policies, sadly. It's sometimes a beauty show, a beauty contest. And this isn't about Ron DeSantis not looking as good as Gavin Newsom or anything like that. It's about poise. It's about mannerisms. It's about presentation. It's about confidence. And it's about how you carry yourself on television. You remember the old story about the Kennedy-Nixon debates back in 1960, where if people heard it on the radio, they thought that Nixon won because he's smart and knew all the facts and knew all the issues. But if people watched on television, they thought Kennedy won because Kennedy looked relaxed and smooth and good looking, and Nixon was sweating and fidgety. Listen, I'm not saying that Ron DeSantis can't beat Gavin Newsom in an election. I sure hope he can. And I think for the most part, the American people do care about facts, and they don't like being lied to, and they do care about policies. And most sentient beings would look at what's happened to California and look at what's happened in Florida and saying, okay, if I've got to choose my own adventure, I'm going the Florida route. But this stuff is important too. And I think Governor DeSantis has some more work to do. That goes well beyond being prepared with all of the facts and data that he clearly was prepared with at this debate. Hey, while we're on the Bill Maher thing, there was one other clip. I told you that we'd get back to James Carville, right? Well, watch this.
So Mike Johnson, he's from your home state of Louisiana, the Speaker of the House. I read today, he wrote a foreword in a book that subscribes to conspiracy theories and homophobic insults. I thought, Mike Johnson wrote the foreword to the Bible? Do you think Mike Johnson can hold his party together now that he has taken the mantle?
Well, first of all, I don't think he can hold his party together. Second of all, you're exactly right. Mike Johnson and what he believes is one of the greatest threats we have today to the United States. When I promise you, I know these people.
You're talking about Christian nationalism.
Absolutely. This is a bigger threat than Al Qaeda to this country. And let me tell you something. They have Speaker of the House. They got probably at least 2 Supreme Court justices, maybe more. Right? Don't kid yourself. And people in the press have no idea who this guy is, how he was formed, what the threat is, and this is a fundamental threat to the United States. It is a fundamental. They don't believe in the Constitution. They'll tell you that. Mike Johnson.
I wonder how the Marine Corps, by the way, feels about Mr. Carville wearing that sweatshirt, that hoodie on screen. Democrats really believe this. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what they really believe. But I can tell you that this is their tactic, and you should be used to it if you're not already used to it. At the very least, get used to it. See, Democrats can't talk about how good things are right now, even though they hold the reins of power everywhere. Even coming after 8 years of Barack Obama, they couldn't tell you how great things were. All they can do is make you 2 things. They have 2 messages. Democrats and the political left in this country and elsewhere around the world, when they're in power, they can't tell you how wonderful things are because you know better. They can't tell you how good they are at governance because you know better. You're living through it. No, all they can do is terrify you about what might happen if you put the other guys into power. This is what they do. This is all they've got, frankly. It's what Biden's entire campaign was in 2020, and it was built on a lie. And now it's going to be what they're going to try to do in 2024. Beware of this. And anytime somebody wants your vote and they sell you on their they sell you and try to attain your vote by telling you that if you don't vote for them, that other guy's going to, ruin everything moving forward. Just especially if they're in power, just to hit the pause button for a second and say, don't tell me what might happen if the other guy wins. Tell me about what you have actually done while you've been in office. When that's all they've got, you know that they're lying to you. And this is all we've heard from the left. That's all we've heard from the Democrats, honestly, since Ronald Reagan. And they keep scaring you and terrifying you about what's going to happen if these guys get into power. Mike Johnson is the most terrifying politician in America, they tell you right now. They didn't even know who Mike Johnson was a month and a half ago. It's embarrassing. All right, that's it for the boy. We had a loaded Monday, didn't we? We're ready to go. We come right out of the gate for you. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. Well, same time-ish, thereabouts. If you're watching after the fact, check us out live. And the way to find out, we got a great email from somebody yesterday saying, we want to watch you live, but we have no way of figuring that out. How do we know when you're going live? Okay, so you go to our YouTube, the Town Hall YouTube account, subscribe and get your notifications there. Then every time we go live, you'll get a notification about 5-10 minutes ahead of time that tells you, hey, Larry's about to go live, and then you can join us. Also, I'd love for you to email me. In fact, let's put the email address up there if we could. Kevin McNair, there it is. Email me, give me your feedback, but also more importantly, give me some questions or comments or other things you'd like to say. We'll incorporate it into our holiday shows coming up that we'll pre-record for you. And that's it. My name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry.